Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am so excited to have my next guest on the show, Ken W. Good. It's going to be engaging, informed, and a balanced conversation about criminal justice reform. Ken, thank you for being here, sir.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me this 7 o'clock or after evening, but I'm very happy to be here and it's nice to meet you and talk to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, sir. Now, before we get into it, I mean, can you tell the audience, some people probably know who you are, can you tell the audience what you do? I got to gave a hint at the beginning of the intro right there, and yeah, what do you do? How did you get into this, into the law? Because you're a lawyer. I gave it away, but go ahead.
Well, I, I was, let's see, I was 35 years old when I got married, but I will say that my life really didn't start until I got married. So I
Wow.
would say probably the most important thing to know about me is that I'm married. She's also a lawyer, and we have two girls. Our oldest is going to be married 2 months from today. So we're in the middle of spending a whole crap load of money and getting ready for a wedding. We do like the young man. We like him a lot, so it's a good fit.
That's good.
So I think the most important thing for people to know is I'm a good family man, or I try to be. Sometimes I'm not, but I try to be. I'm a Christian man, but I also am an attorney. I've been practicing law for over 35 years. I'm 65 years old. I'm an old fart.
No, you're not.
Um,
I'm
yeah,
right, I'm right behind you. I'm 57.
but I've been doing this for a long time. I started out representing doctors in hospitals when they got sued, and then graduated from that doing all the appellate work for, our small office. We were in Tyler, but we were connected to a large firm in Dallas. So I started doing all of our appellate work. And so, I mean, I got a lot of opportunities. Argued my first case at the Supreme Court of Texas as a
Wow.
4-year lawyer. Um, but, a bondsman got in trouble. And so we asked somebody, who do I need to hire to fix this kind of issue? And they said, you need an appellate attorney. And so he, someone recommended me, and so that started this path that's become a practice and become a specialty. Uh, it goes hand in hand with my, appellate work because it's lots of legal issues. Was asked to attend a hearing to just give my opinion on what was going on a case in Houston years ago. And I came out of it thinking this is going south. This is going really bad. The judge, I think, is making the wrong decision. She's applying the wrong standard. And so I came out and I set off the alarm, and I've been proven right because she was reversed 7, 8, maybe 9 times in that case
Wow.
by the
Wow.
appellate courts. And so I just decided that we had to become experts on this area of the law because if we're not going to tell the story, then nobody's going to tell the
Wow.
story. And so I've written articles that have been published across the United States on the issues of bail reform, what's good bail reform, what's bad bail reform, and I talk about those issues like I'm sure we're going to do today.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've done debates where, I've lost my temper and I try not to. I love to have a civil debate, but, I was taught to practice law by a guy who was a very gifted attorney. And he told me that if, at that time, being a defense attorney, it was, the old, the country club set. And so
Hmm.
he was taught if you want to get down in the mud and fight, let's get down in the mud and fight. And so
Yeah.
that was the way I was taught to practice law, and I did that for a long time. And so I think I don't do it as much, but I'm kind of known if you want somebody to get down and fight for you, that you call me.
Hmm.
Um, but I love it. And you know what I love about the bail industry is it's small business owners. I mean, blue collar values. And so it really hits with my small town blue collar
Yeah.
values
Yeah.
and background. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I've been doing it for so long.
Well, thank you for the background. And yeah, I mean, bail is I know it's been on the national forefront for a while now. There's states, as you probably know, that are doing some crazy things with
Yeah,
bail.
there's nobody arguing on behalf of the bail industry, really.
Yeah.
Nobody likes bail, but it's been around 200 years because it does one thing and it does it so much better than anything else. In fact,
Hmm.
it does it so much better that gets people to go to court that, the activists will just lie about it. And
Yeah.
so that's the big problem is, it's kind of hard to overcome the activist lies a lot of times.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this, Ken. When people hear cash bail, they immediately take sides. Before politics enters the room, what does the public need to know first? What do they need to understand about cash bail? I know about it, not obviously as much as you because I was a cop for a long time. But when people hear that, what do they need to know from an expert like you?
There is no alternative that performs on the level of the private industry.
Hmm.
None. So let's compare numbers. So the private industry has a failure to appear rate of less than 10%. Cash bonds, which is just putting up cash with the court, is at least double that, maybe more. Uh, Simple release depends on how you call it in different states. Texas calls it personal bonds. New York calls it release on no bail.
Hmm.
California calls it release on zero bail. Has a 50, 60, 80% failure to appear rate depending on who you talk to.
Hmm.
And what does that mean? If a criminal case can't go forward without the body of, without the
Yeah.
defendant, except in very limited circumstances, if you start a trial and then they run. And so if you fail to appear, the case gets put on hold till you come back. And so
Which could be
uh,
never.
could
Which
be
could,
it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours, it could be 2 days, it could be a month, it could be never. And
yeah, yeah,
so failure to appear rates matter. And
yeah.
so the lowest failure to appear rate is the private industry, and it's not even close. That's the reason why it's been around so long. So I think that's the first thing the public needs to know. Second thing is the private industry doesn't cost the taxpayers a dime.
Yeah.
All of these things that they're proposing to take our place or take the place of the private industry costs a lot of money. The New
Yeah.
Jersey plan went bankrupt. They had to do a statewide tax increase to fund it, and it still
Hmm.
ran out of money. As a result of that, there's no proposal anywhere else in the country since the New Jersey plan where they're proposing anything like it because it's so expensive. So all the experiments that we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years are just simple release. We're going to release somebody on their promise that they'll come back. We're not going to do any supervision. We're really not going to do anything. It's just we're going to pinky swear they're going to come back. And you know what? Those have been a complete failure and
Hmm.
lots of failures to appear. And, when you have back failures to appear, you have backlogs grow and backlogs grow. There's only way you prevent the criminal justice system from collapse is dismissing cases. And when you start dismissing cases, criminals see that as a green light to commit more crime. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. Now, for you, you started to talk about it a little bit. Can you explain the original purpose of bail in America and how it's supposed to function? You covered it, but
Well,
how is it?
bail dates, I mean, bail is one of those things that came over with our ancestors,
Hmm.
from Europe. I mean, we call it the common law. A bond is something under the common law. It's common law is custom and practice. And so, under the common law that came over from England, a bond is something signed by a principal and two sureties. Over time, we changed it in Texas to only have to have one surety.
Hmm.
But a bond is, I mean, we hear all the time, well, we should change the way we do bail because there's a presumption of innocence. Well, no, the presumption of innocence applies at trial. I
Exactly.
mean, and the problem is when our activists say that, it's just a talking point because that's been resolved by case law, decades ago. Because all what bail is, what assurance are you going to give the court that you're going to return to answer the charges after your release? So, what assurance are you going to give that you're going to come back? A simple release is you're giving them no assurance but your
Oh.
promise, and there's no accountability, there's no consequences. When the private industry posts a bond on your behalf, they're acting like an insurance company. They're
Hmm.
guaranteeing that they're going to pay the county or the court the full amount of the bond if you don't come back under Texas law. Um, and there are situations where you can mitigate, or there's time limits and stuff like that where you can mitigate because it's the quicker you get them back, the quicker the case gets back on track, and the quicker the victims can get justice. Um, so really, bail is what assurance that you're going to give, and we're guaranteeing appearance. So
Yeah.
we're guaranteeing that you're going to appear for court, and if you don't, then we're going to pay the ultimate price. At one point in time in our history, that price was the bondsman took the place of the defendant.
Wow.
for a very short period of time. But the rest of the time, it's been a financial consequence. So if you
Yeah.
don't show up for court, then the bond amount will get forfeited.
Yeah. And then of course we all know that there are, depending on the circumstances, there could be no bail, depending on the
Yes, and
severity of the crime and
yeah, but you
other.
know where the bail reform movement is doing is they're playing on people's sympathies, saying, we got to treat everybody the same.
No, you
And
can't
so
treat
if you're
everybody the
charged
same.
for theft and I'm charged for theft, we both need to be treated the same. And the problem is when you do that, and I could have a 10-year criminal history and you could be a first time
Exactly.
arrestee, and we need to treat people different based on their criminal history. And so these soft on crime policies that want to treat everybody the same, well, who takes advantage of those?
Well,
Gangs,
the
career
criminals.
criminals, organized
Yeah.
crime. I mean, they have figured out ways to make millions of dollars off of these soft on crime
Yeah.
policies.
Yeah. Yeah. And the no cash bail, as you know, has become a national flashpoint. And now, in your view, Ken, I mean, are these policies contributing to, I think I know the answer, repeat offending and public safety concerns? Uh,
Absolutely.
or is
They,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, there absolutely they are, and there's reports out there saying there are. And the problem is, the activists like in Harris County in Houston, Texas, they've done some court decrees for soft on crime policies for misdemeanors, and then they issue a monitor's report every 6 months saying, "Oh, there's recidivism is really low." The problem is the DA's issued a report just saying they're cooking the books on calculating recidivism. Same thing in New York, an assistant DA issued a report on recidivism, and their response is, "Oh no, no, no! Look at this!" And I did a podcast with him showing exactly how they're cooking the books on calculating recidivism to not be a problem, and they never say their policies are decreasing crime. All they argue is, well, it's not the cause of crime increasing. Believe us, believe us.
Well,
We
there's just got to
promise.
be accountability. I mean, and in your
Mhm.
opinion, I mean, is this politics? Is this keeping people in office like DAs and
Mhm.
ADAs and all these? I mean, I know DA is an elected position, but politicians, is this the reason why they're doing this? Because
Oh yes, and really, you can trace the history of this. You can see it pretty clearly where in our history, about 6 months before the national election, probably every election cycle until this last one, there would be some tragedy in the news, and then we would see all of these
yeah, every day.
protests, and they would say, one party would say, "You're being picked on, and you need to get angry, and you need to come out and vote in larger numbers for us." And then, after the election, business as usual. And
Hmm.
so the people supporting those candidates started noticing that nothing was happening. And so they started electing what I call the true believers. And,
Hmm.
some people might call them the crazies.
Yeah.
And then we've gotten these activist groups that are, raising money off of this. And where we are now is the activist groups will get you elected as a soft on crime person, and then they'll lead you down a rabbit trail. They're not going to ever admit what they're pushing you to do is not working. They're never going to
Yeah.
tell you that
Yeah.
this is making crime worse. They will drive you all the way to the into the rabbit trail and push you off the cliff. Like look at the DA that just got defeated in November in
Yeah.
LA County.
Yeah.
I mean, Gascon. I mean, he got 20 something percent of the vote. And I mean, I would say he was pushed off the cliff by the activists because he was their poster boy.
Unless those same people that are soft on this stuff are the victim of a crime. Then they want
Oh,
justice.
yes. I
Then they
agree with
want
that.
people in jail, no cash bail, nothing, no bond, no
Yeah.
nothing.
Well, and then, yes. And then, there are, but you know what? It's a coalition. And part of that coalition are true believers. And then part of that coalition are troublemakers. The true believers, you know, yeah, I think they really fall into that category, and because they're the ones that are being taken advantage of. But as crime increases, the coalition, splits, and usually the soft on crime DAs have a very short shelf life, 1 or 2 elections,
Yeah, yeah.
and then they get defeated and Gascon, they get replaced with a law and order DA.
And I think it's, in my opinion, Ken, you tell me, I would love to hear your thoughts. I mean, I think lawmakers, you know, not just in this particular area, But since we're talking about it, yeah, this area, we're talking about, I think they make decisions on bail policy based on ideology rather than practical outcomes. Would you agree?
Okay, I'm going to say a little bit different. I'm going to say most legislatures don't have a knowledge about bail.
Hmm.
And, like in Texas, members of the House and the Senate get assigned to committees. And in the House, nobody wants to be on the Criminal Justice Committee that sees our issues. And so we usually end up with a lot of people that don't know our issues and a couple of people that do. And, from one party, the people that do are the activists. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got a legislator who's pretty well respected in the Texas House who every session files a bill that there should be a presumption of a personal bond for all misdemeanors in the state. Now, that would do substantial damage to the state if that happened. He files it every year or every 2 years since we're a biannual
Yeah. Yeah.
legislative session.
Yeah.
And I think I classify him as in the true believer category. He doesn't realize the damage he would do.
But it just amazes me and that,
Oh, I'm sorry. And what I was saying that for is he's considered an expert on bail in the legislature. So he's someone that, people look to as an expert. And I so I think that it's a topic where a lot of legislators have other priorities. And so sometimes the ones that are perceived as the experts are really activists in sheep's clothing.
yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, you're the expert, Ken. I'm just, an outsider looking in, but I just don't understand how this is. I mean, this is, a community, a national, issue because, I mean, it's just kind of the low hanging fruit. I mean, it just seems pretty common sense to me.
Mm.
If you go out there and commit a crime, a heinous crime, and you have a horrible record, a mile long, you know, there needs to be consequences to that. Why are we letting these people out? You know?
Do you remember when the Democrats had a problem at the national level because their base did not want their presidential candidate to have
Yeah.
supported the Iraq war, and so Clinton did, and that was a problem. And when she ran against Obama, I mean, we're during that kind of time right now where you on one side of the spectrum to raise money and run for national office, you have to spout these issues,
Yeah.
which are essentially soft on crime policies. And if you were to stand up, there was a former judge who was a mayor who was a minority group on News Nation Town Hall talking about criminal justice reform. And she made the comment, until you have something that is a true alternative that has the same low failure to appear rate and same level of accountability because of all the supervision that the private industry does, till you have something that does that, then you don't have an alternative. If you said that as a national candidate or statewide candidate in pretty much any state, you couldn't raise any money
Yeah.
just by saying that.
Well, I get it. It's politics, but it's
Well, it's
also
policing your party. Can you
yeah, it's
imagine? We don't police our parties on, shenanigans. Look at Swalwell. He could do whatever he wanted to a woman, but he couldn't say, I support private bail.
well, because they were protecting him for so many years. But
Well, were they protecting him or they were getting him to vote exactly the way they needed
well,
him to
exactly.
vote because they were holding him by his,
That's
nose ring?
that's what I mean is they were protecting him so he could vote a certain way. But I understand that, and I just I don't know. I get it. It's politics, and you're raising money, and you want to get elected, and it's a power grab, and I get all that stuff. It's just that this is an issue that affects each and every one of us, and like I said, it goes back to if whoever it is, Republican, Democrat, maybe they hate bail or bond until they're a victim of the crime, and then it's a different story. And then of course they want justice, and they don't want this person out, and they're going
But
to
didn't we go
stay.
through the same cycle in the 60s where we
Yeah.
felt safe, we were forgiving in our laws, then we had crime increasing, and then we had a fight between the parties on how to address it, and one party refused to do anything, and so we ended up with a backlash with
Hmm.
Reagan and the war on drugs. I would say we've just done the same thing.
Yeah.
We've done the same thing with Trump 2.0 was a result of crime policy and immigration policy.
Yeah.
And if the public would vote one more election on crime, then both parties would reset. and the one that's out of whack would reset to be law and order. But we need one more election. I'm not sure we're going to get it.
No. Now, there's a question for you. So, critics of the bail bond industry say wealth should not determine freedom before trial. How do you respond to concerns that traditional bail systems disproportionately impact low income defendants?
Well, I would say, first of all, if you are in jail and you're a first-time offender, you don't have a problem getting out of jail.
Mm,
I think the biggest lesson of charitable bail funds and their experiment that has gone wrong across the country is that there's no first-time offender stuck in jail, contrary to what they argue. And second of all, if you've got a criminal record and maybe even an extensive critical criminal record, if the judge sets bond at an amount you cannot afford, it's not because you're poor, it's because you have a criminal history.
yeah.
And that's what's getting lost in the argument. We have protections for the poor, but once you have a criminal history, those protections don't trump public safety.
Mhm.
And I would go back to all of these things that we're doing are experiments. They're not been proven to be correct or work. Are you willing to spend twice the amount of money on the courts to double the number of courts so you can have a worse pretrial release system? No. And that's where we are. The public's not willing to pay for double the number of courts, so we have a shoddy system and we're having to dismiss cases, which defendants are seeing that as a green light to commit more crime because the activists won't admit what they're doing is not working.
And it's interesting how states differ on this. We were talking about it
Hmm.
earlier. So you get a state like, so how is Texas in regards to this? I mean, I
Oh,
don't live.
good. Texas is good. They're going the opposite direction. They're strengthening the criminal justice system. They're limiting the use of simple release and
Florida's like that too.
yeah, demanding or requiring the review of criminal histories before setting bail. And Florida has a statewide bail schedule set by the Supreme Court, which is conservative. So that's good. And then we've also limited the use of simple release. I already said that. And we just gave judges the ability starting January 1 to deny bail for certain crimes if the DA asks them to and they meet their evidentiary burden for certain violent offenses like
Yeah.
murder, capital murder.
Yeah. And it's amazing how all these people in problematic states, we'll call them that are moving to states that have their crap together, like Texas,
Well, and
Florida,
we still have the
Nevada.
fight. I mean, we still have the fight, but there's a lot of states that are rolling back. New
Yeah.
York has rolled back their bail reform 3 times, and
Yeah.
it's one of the big issues in the current governor's race. And but then you've got Washington State, which is currently looking to revise their bail system in the opposite direction by Supreme Court rule, and something that we haven't seen done probably in 3 or 4 years. And we had a spat of that before then. So the activists aren't going away. They're not
No.
giving up.
Well, and if they, they'll move on to another issue after the bail.
Well, but
Uh,
the disparity between red and blue states on this issue. I mean, we don't even think about, I mean, look at what California did on Prop 47. They changed certain felonies to misdemeanors, including theft under
which
$950.
is,
And then the DAs decided not to prosecute it. Well, we're just not going to prosecute that anymore. And so what happens? Shoplifting skyrockets. Stores can't withstand $25,000 a day being stolen.
mhm.
And they're saying crime is going down because it's not even a crime anymore. And so stores close, the crime in the areas skyrocket, and then you've got the Nancy Pelosi federal building telling employees to work from home. It's not safe to be in the neighborhood. And then you got commercial property values just nosediving, selling for 50 or 30% of their value.
And you can't tell me these people aren't that dumb. I mean, they're not that dumb. They know what they're doing, but I don't understand it's one thing, the criminal aspect of it, which is huge. I mean, there's no accountability, but then there's the economic impact it has on
Oh
the
yeah.
state where
I,
people are moving out.
I just did a podcast with a guy. In fact, I hated it so much. It took me forever to edit it because I just could not stand by the end. I mean, like you said, I like to have a conversation. I don't like to get angry with people, but I mean, he taught classes on the economics of crime. And his whole thing was, well, we need to do something to Facebook Marketplace or things like that. And, instead of the shoplifters, I mean, I'm like, you
What?
gotta hold people accountable.
I mean, it's just
And his argument was like, well, there's never a zero unless you want to be Singapore, you're never going to have zero crime. I mean, and there uh, they execute people for drug charges. I'm like, there's a big gap
Yeah.
between zero crime and what we're doing currently. It doesn't have to be one extreme or the other. I mean, obviously we want to fight crime. I mean, can you imagine? Yeah, it doesn't the economics of crime would say don't blow up any boats in the Gulf of America that are carrying drugs, but Trump obviously disagreed with that. And there's
Yeah.
got to be some moral things about if we can keep drugs out of our out of our country. That I mean, we've decreased our overdose rate dramatically
It's
by that.
huge. And it's deterrent. You know that. I mean,
Yes.
if we hold people accountable, like you mentioned the boats being blown up every other day. I don't have a problem with that. They're killing millions of people every year. And what does it do? It's a deterrent. Same with bail.
Hmm.
If you keep people in
Yeah.
jail until their court date, until they have to face the judge, that's a deterrent where the
It
criminals are
is,
going to
but
be
the problem is if you go too far to the left, crime increases, the public's not going to stand for that. But if you go too far right, the public's not going to vote, I mean, not going to pay to hold everybody in jail. You got to find a happy medium. And the problem is, probably the private industry is a happy medium when you overlay accountability on top of it. Don't give somebody in Houston, Texas 17 bonds because they failed to show up 17 times. You just give them the same personal bond every time, simple release. I mean, give them one, give them two, and then after that, you hold them in court.
yeah.
I mean, the whole concept on, I've heard judges say, well, the Constitution demands that I release them, and so I can't make them. I have to release them. I have no choice. That's absolutely not true. That's been rejected by the Fifth Circuit as an argument made in the very case you were a party to. You're just
Mhm.
lying. If somebody doesn't do what you tell them to do, and that includes don't violate any more laws, you have the right, if they get in trouble again, to hold them till trial.
Yeah.
And we just have, I mean, you know what? I had a chief deputy tell me one time. He went to court on a specific case, and because he didn't want him out of jail, and he sat there and he just waited. And when the hearing was over, the judge released him, but the judge called him up to the stand. I mean, up to the bench, and he said, "My party wants him released." So it's not about criminal justice. It's not what's in the best interest of public safety. It's my party wants him released.
Yeah. I'm just tired of hearing every time you turn on the news, Ken, I know you see it, that somebody's been released and they go out
Hmm.
there and they create, a heinous crime. Half the
Hmm.
time they shouldn't even be here, but that's another story. Now, you've written about what successful bail reform looks like. What does effective reform actually look like to you?
Well, I think a lot of it we've already talked about. I think it's
Mm,
leaning more on the private industry since it
mm,
has such a great low failure to appear rate. You want to lean into that, but it also has a strong element of accountability. There is a case that kind of demonstrates all of this, and it's called Sanchez versus Alabama. And this case they had to rely, they had to they the trial court ordered them to release everybody. Couldn't hold anybody, like this soft on crime policies. And they lived under it for 4 years, both misdemeanors and felonies. Couldn't hold anybody. And the sheriff just said, he's an old Marine, and he said, this isn't right. I'm not going to settle. We're going to appeal. And they went up to, I think, the 10th or 11th Circuit, and they won. I mean, reversed, rendered, dismissed.
mm,
And so I talked to the sheriff and he said, Ken, we went back to what we know works. We told defendants if you don't come to court, there's consequences. You'll be held accountable. And what do you know? When we did that, about 6 months later, crime started dropping.
mm. Now, when you talk to, you know, I don't know if you advise like the governors and legislators or major city leaders, um, what three factors should they weigh when balancing fairness, constitutional rights, and community concerns? We talked a lot about it, but what do you think again? What factors should they weigh?
Well, I think it depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm going to talk to a city person, I'm going to say you don't want to put in policies that are going to kill your tax base
Hmm.
because you can kill it with your commercial property values. And so you want to be very careful about policies that will tank that. If I'm talking to the governor, I'm going to talk about public safety. I'm going to talk about accountability, and I'm going to talk about criminal histories. I think the most important reform Texas did was to require judges to review criminal histories in setting bail.
I just don't
Now,
understand why that is. And I
how's
and I
that
hate
controversial?
and I hate to interrupt you, but I don't understand why that's not mandatory. I mean, why shouldn't
Yes,
you look
yes.
at what do they call it? I can't remember what they call it. A not a you know what the hell? No, I'm thinking about a PSI, which is different. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, but the reason why Texas didn't require it by statute before then, they had case laws that said they could, but they didn't have a statewide database system to show it. And so you could look at your criminal history in your county and you might look at the surrounding counties, but you didn't have a way of displaying their criminal histories statewide. And so one of the things they had to do was set up a system, the public safety report system in Texas, so that they could display the criminal histories for the judges. And so that was the impediment. But I agree with you. But if you're doing a charge-based release system, which is just based on the charge, no matter what your criminal history is, because we want to treat everybody the same, no matter how many times you've done that crime, then you don't need the criminal history. And that's why I'm so opposed to the charge-based release system because it becomes just a cost of doing business for organized crime, gangs, and career criminals. They don't mind spending 2 weeks in jail to make a whole bunch of money on drugs because, the soft on crime people quit seeking any enhancements. And that was part of the portfolio of things that they were required to agree to by, the Soros
Mhm.
group of people.
Do you think there's a middle ground somewhere
No,
between
I don't.
activists and public safety?
No. No, and the reason why I don't is because people have asked me many times, what's the compromise?
Mhm.
How do you compromise with people who won't admit there's a problem, who will not admit what they're proposing is not working and will not work because they just say, well, we just need more time. No, it's not working. There's a reason why. And they'll lie, they'll cook the books. For years they were writing articles saying, bail reform is not increasing crime. You don't have to believe us. You just have to look at the FBI statistics. So last October, I wrote an article about why the FBI statistics were wrong because they were changing over to a new system. To be able to report to the new system, you had to buy new equipment, and the two largest police departments in the country didn't have the new equipment to report. And so, what do you know? 10 days later, in October, before the election, they updated the FBI statistics and suddenly showed crime increasing. And so the activists could no longer talk about the FBI statistics being in support of their argument. So they had to switch. One, they did, oh, well, it's not bail reform that's increasing crime, but more so, immediately they switched to yelling that Trump is a fascist, Trump is a tyrant, because they couldn't talk about crime anymore. And I was like, I mean, if they're not going to admit just on a fundamental basis that they've been saying, don't look, you don't have to listen to us, just look at the FBI statistics. Now the FBI statistics have changed. Well, it's still not us. Well, it's never going to be their policies.
Well, and the thing, and you know this. I mean, you're talking about NIBRs and UCRs and stuff like that with crime statistics, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, sir. I mean, there's a whole bunch. I mean,
Yeah.
the FBI statistics are one, but there's a whole bunch of statistics. We do the CDC does murders
Hmm.
tracking, and there's the Department of Justice does that. And so when the FBI statistics are going in the opposite direction of the other two, then you know something's wrong.
Well, and
But
people,
but the social sciences were saying that. They were saying that these can't be right, but the politicians and the activists were still quoting it.
well, and there's, I've heard this before from people, and does every crime get committed reported to law enforcement? No. So what I
No,
was so
no.
what
And we
so
have a closure problem
we have
too.
a closure problem, but every crime doesn't committed. You probably know there's what they call a dark figure of crime,
Hmm.
and that is the crimes that aren't reported. And there's
Yeah, but
many of them that
that
aren't
one's
reported.
hard for the public to understand, especially I think if you're, that bleeds into the whole activist argument. Oh, they want to say there's a lot more crime that's not being reported, and they're wanting to pick
Yes.
on y'all. So that's a hard point to make. But you know what? One of the points that I don't shy away from is, um, we don't have we have a couple of races that are disproportionately committing crime. There's reasons for that, but it's one of those unspoken things you can't say. Why do
Yeah.
we have a disproportionate number of certain races in our prisons? There's
Mhm.
reasons for that.
Yeah.
Number one, we've discounted crime on those minority groups historically, and so as long as they committed crime within their racial groups, we didn't care
Yeah.
for many years, and then suddenly we started caring, and so we started regulating crime in those racial groups, but they were running amok with crime. I mean, there was Minnesota, the police started tracking crime, and so they tracked it all the way down to the race of the person calling in the crime. And the first year of that data, when they started tracking it, showed that a 10-to-1 ratio
Yeah.
on reported crime for certain minority groups over the rest. But the problem is, once it got into the criminal justice system, that very minority group got better treated than the rest.
Yeah.
So disproportionate amount of crime being committed or called in, but once they got in the criminal justice system, they got better treatments, better results.
Now, looking ahead 5 to 10 years,
Mhm.
what do you believe the future of bail and pretrial justice in America is going to look like?
Well, I am very hopeful because I don't think that the soft on crime policies are sustainable. The public's not going to stand for more crime. Um, the pro- uh, so I think it's going to go one of two ways. There's going to be a bigger and bigger separation between the red and blue states, and you're going to have public safety in, you know, one color of states, and you're going to have chaos, declining tax revenue. You can already see that
You
we're
can
kind
see
of
that.
getting
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can see that now we're getting to the breaking point where blue states are raising taxes to make up for people moving, but it's going to, you kind of get to the point where it's a death spiral where it's just going further and further down. It'll get to that point a lot quicker when they're at the point, in California proposing a billionaire's tax, a one-time
Yeah.
tax.
Saw that.
Minnesota's proposing an annual billionaire's tax. That'll run off all your big taxpayers overnight. And then what do you got? What are you left with? I mean, nobody's ever thought of maybe we should end fraud and live within our means. They're not.
No, we can't do that.
But the crazy thing is, a lot of these things we don't hear about. Did we hear about all of the gangs or um, all of the illegal drug trade coming into the country for foreign countries before Trump
Mhm.
2.0 was running for office? I mean, remember when he was saying the Venezuela gangs were taking over apartment complexes and the mainstream media went
I remember that. Yeah.
apoplectic, and then finally they had to admit, well, it's not a lot of apartment complexes, and I'm like, really?
That was in Colorado, by the way.
I was like, really? That's your argument? Well, they're not taking over a lot of
And
them.
I and
Just
I and I'm still waiting to see the information and the data that Nick Shirley has, because he's out in California right now,
yeah.
doing that. And I don't even know what the hell happened to Minnesota. It kind of just fell off the radar.
Well, they
Nobody's talking
just
about it anymore.
well, Minnesota, the legislature just sided with the governor to prevent an
I saw
investigation
that.
from going forward. So, and then in California, they're trying to enact a statute to make it a crime
The Nick
to
Shirley
do the
Act.
Nick Shirley Act. I mean, yeah, we hate fraud so much that we're going to outlaw anybody looking into it because we hate fraud and we don't want anybody to know about
And
it.
you can't tell me that the average citizen of the United States doesn't look at that and say something's wrong with this. I mean, that is an admission right there that we we don't want you in some way. That's almost an admission. We don't want you to investigate fraud. That's kind of I've never heard about that before. Why wouldn't anybody want to know where our taxpayer dollars are going?
Yeah, I mean, that's just crazy. No, I mean, there's no explanation for that. But, I would say TDS, Trump derangement syndrome is running strong.
We're gonna have
And
you.
so I think a lot of the stuff going on in California and Minnesota currently is to
Yeah.
cover up what the fraud allegations or investigations and
Yeah.
distract with Trump derangement syndrome.
Well, I hear they're coming out. The FDA is going to approve a pill for that pretty soon, buddy.
I had a former pastor that retired and he lost a little bit. But the way he lost it is he started running
Yeah.
and he couldn't stop. And I remember the story my dad told that they finally agreed that he needed to go to a nursing home. And my dad went and picked him up from running,
Oh,
and
wow.
they took him to the nursing home and they gave him a pill. And the pill was, essentially to keep him sedated.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I just think of that. And it's like, how do you know, how are you not going to find out the truth as you're going to be on the funny pill the rest of your
Well,
time?
well, I appreciate you being here, Ken. I could talk to you forever. I'd love to have you back on sometime.
Well, I appreciate that.
Great conversation. If people want to find you out in the internet,
Mhm.
in the world, how do they locate you, buddy?
Well, we have a website called pbtx.com. It's the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. We have a blog where we highlight important criminal justice stories. We also have our own podcast. There's a link on the menu, but you can also go directly to it called thebailpost.com. All we talk about is criminal justice issues. So you want to know what the New Jersey plan is, you want to know what defund the police, what the science behind that says, and it's not we're going to be safer, is that the murder rate goes up immediately and it
Oh,
goes
yeah.
up disproportionately for minority groups, especially blacks. But you know what? Those people still argue, the activists still argue we need to defund the police so we'll be safer. It's all just about politics, politics to the extreme, and we need to have the parties reset to both be like they historically have been, law and order. And the
You
only
know,
way we can do that is vote law and order candidates one more time.
exactly. And you know this. I mean, remember in New York and in Chicago, those same neighborhoods that, there's high crime neighborhoods actually want the police there.
Yeah. I feel like in Chicago, we've turned over Chicago to the gangs. And that's really the unspoken. Nobody will say that, but
Right.
we've turned over control of the city to the gangs. How can you not say that when you have as many shootings they have every
Absolutely.
week, day in and
Absolutely.
day out? That town is controlled by gangs and nobody wants to fight them. And the reason why I know that is when they're having a campaign, an election, they talk to the gangs about going out and getting people to vote. Well, okay, so they run that town.
Well, Ken, thank you for being on the show, my friend. It's a pleasure talking to you. Keep up the good fight. Keep up doing God's work because it is God's work. And I appreciate you being here, sir.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right, brother. Take care.
Mhm.